Hello and welcome everyone. A very good morning from LinkedIn Marketing Solutions and AdTech New Delhi to the second episode of Pandemic Pivots. I'm Shiny, your host for today, and I handle content at AdTech. Pandemic Pivots is a three-part web series focused on bringing to our audience stories of leading marketeers and how they transform their 2020 marketing plans. Now, I want to introduce to you our moderator for this discussion, Sachin Sharma. Sachin recently joined LinkedIn to lead the enterprise business for LinkedIn's marketing solutions in India, where he takes care of large accounts portfolio across tech, financial services, education, and government. Interestingly, this is Sachin's second stint with LinkedIn. Previously, he was responsible for strengthening the mid-market and the long-tail advertising business. With over a decade's experience specializing in leading digital marketing functions, Sachin is passionate about managing and supporting business growth opportunities for disruptive B2B and B2C brands. Welcome to Pandemic Pivot, Sachin.
Thank you, Shiny.
It's
great partnering with the AdTech team and with you. A very warm welcome to all our participants, some of who are joining us on Zoom, and we are also live, as Shiny said, on LinkedIn Live, so feel free to join us there. So this is a three-part web series, and the intent is to explore how marketers across industries have quickly pivoted their marketing models and their strategies in these testing times over the last few months. Today, we are very excited because we have two panelists who are both very experienced members of marketing fraternity from two leading technology companies, Microsoft and Freshworks. Both of these entities have pivoted successfully on multiple fronts in the last few months. And our aim today through this dialogue is to help highlight how subtle differences in their approach, one being a large globally matrix tech company and the other a global SaaS unicorn, how these pivots and these minor changes have helped them over this period. So without further ado, it's an absolute honor to introduce both our panelists. First up is Hitu Chawla, who's the newly appointed Chief Marketing Officer for Microsoft in India. In this new role, she is going to be owning the brand voice and purpose, managing all programs that support customer acquisition, retention, and advocacy for both their commercial and consumer business in India. And Hitu comes with 20 plus years of diverse international experience, strategy consulting, business management, and of course, core marketing expertise. In my conversations with her, she also stood out as someone that's able to balance modern marketing, data-driven and analytical, with a touch for humanness and creativity. So I hope this will be a very engaging dialogue. Hitu, welcome. I know you're joining us at a slightly inconvenient time while you're still in Seattle, but it's great to have you here.
Thank you, Sachin. Well, surely an interesting time and space dimension all of us are operating in. But how about today I use it to my advantage? Because if there's something that I say that doesn't make sense, I can conveniently put it on being sleep deprived. But on a more serious note, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I highly doubt that, Hitu. Welcome again. I also know this is your first official presentation for the Indian marketing audience. We look forward to your presence in India soon. Our second panelist is someone that most participants would have heard of. You must have consumed some stories and content from him. Arun Pattabiraman, he is the Global VP for Growth and Marketing at Freshworks. And one of those unique individuals who has the honor of operating at the cusp of sales and marketing. For example, in his current role, he manages 300 plus marketing and sales development professionals, driving their charter for digital and transformation growth through revenue-focused programs. Again, looking at acquisitions, engagement, retention, and advocacy. Interesting bit about Arun is he is an erstwhile LinkedIn power profile, great, and was also recognized as one of the most influential marketing leaders by World Marketing Congress. So welcome to the episode 2 of Pandemic Pivots, Arun. Arun, you're joining us from Chennai. It's great to have you here.
Thanks a lot, Sachin. It's a real honor and privilege to be a part of this panel. And I'm really looking forward to the conversations with you and Hitu for the next
Awesome. One. Great. Let's dive into this. But before we get all going, a little bit of initial story just to get our audience a little pepped up and participative. What I'm going to do is something fun. I'm going to ask you 3 questions, which you can answer either with one single word or just use a phrase. And we would request our participants to also put in their answers. There are two ways they can do that, is either on LinkedIn or in the Zoom chat window, depending on the channel that you're joining us from. So let's get to question number one. What is that one phrase that you would use or a word to describe the last few months? We'll start with you, Hitu.
Well, we were just chatting, and like I said, these past few months have had all of us cycle through a mix of emotions. So I would say to encapsulate it in one word would be very tough. But if I had to, I'll pick mindfulness and creativity. Mindful on a personal front and creativity in a work environment, because at the end of the day, crisis is the mother of all inventions.
Great. Arun, let's hear it from you.
Well, for me, I will start by saying the past few months have been nothing but strange. It's something that none of us had prepared ourselves for. It's something that we are witnessing as a generation, probably the first time and hopefully the last time in our lives. So it's really been strange, both personally and professionally, because we're trying to grapple with life situations that we haven't experienced in the past. And even on the professional front, it's no different. So for me, it's been an extremely strange time.
Right. Interesting. At LinkedIn, we use a term that encapsulates both of your feelings. We've been using this term quite a bit, growth mindset. So how do we move on from where we are and look at the optimistic, the positive side of this? Let's move on to our next question. Again, a question with a twist, because one word or phrase, what has shown up a lot in your professional conversations lately?
Sachin, you want?
Yeah, sure. Hitu, go for it.
I would say undoubtedly unlearn and reimagine.
Great. It needs no further explanation. Arun, let's hear your one word.
I would say Zoom more than anything else. If I have to be a little literal, literally, because we have just been on meetings all through the days. And for me, I think it's, that's the one word that I think, honestly, we've all used a lot of times in the past few months.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you, Arun. From LinkedIn's perspective, just want to add, it's been customer value. We've been just talking quite a bit about that. Now that gets us also to the next question. And this one's a little bit different, because we're going to ask you to tell us one word or phrase that actually describes your marketing team's response to the pandemic.
I would go with this. Sorry, Sachin, go ahead.
Go ahead, Hitu.
Okay, I would say it's a phrase, and that's listen, learn, and adapt. Because more than ever before, I think it is imperative that we have our ears to the ground, because we need to listen to the customer and be able to respond quickly to their needs and literally make monthly, weekly, daily adjustments if required.
Great. And Arun, for you?
I think for me, it's agility. I think it's similar to what Hitu shared, but I think agility has described the way we have all adapted on the professional front this time. Every day is a new day, and there is a need to respond to what's happening around us differently.
Yeah, and I see a great overlap in both of your responses. I think it's the agility to rethink, relearn, and adapt. But I was actually also, from a LinkedIn perspective, wanted to shoot out a word there. And since this entire webinar, the 3 episodes are arranged by our marketing team, I think the only one word I can use is phenomenal. So great. On that note, we'll move ahead into just the actual questions. The audience is participating. I'm sure they're totally engaged. So here's the first one that I would like for both of you to address the audience on is what were or are some of the unique business challenges that you had to overcome? And if you can help our participants just try and understand what were the first 24 hours, first week, first month, what did that look like? And how did you employ some of these new tactics to engage your customers in a meaningful way? And on this one, Arun, maybe you go first, and Hitu, feel free to chime in.
Sure. So I think for us, Sachin, it almost felt like the first 5 weeks we went through the 5 stages of grief, all the way from denial to acceptance. So it was a really strange time. Most of us didn't expect this will come our way, and we thought we were going to get back to normalcy. There was a there was still a belief that, hey, this is just a passing phase and let's wait and watch it for the next couple of weeks. But it's only at the end of the month or the 5th week that we really realized that, hey, this is not going to change in the immediate future. And for all you know that, your world around you has forever changed, and so has the business, right? So I think for us, the way we responded to that reality was to focus the team on a few key themes for the next few months. And by doing that, we were just going back to the basics. We identified 5 key themes. One was to say, let's renew our focus on existing customers. We realized that most of what we needed to, most of the insights that we need to pull together a plan for the next few months, we should be able to do only after understanding what's happening with our existing customers. So one was trying to really understand the world that our customers were living in, what was going on in their world. Second is balancing the priorities between new demand generation and driving more from existing customers. So that's the first theme. The second thing was, obviously we realized that all the campaigns that we were running literally had to be stopped, and we have to go back to the drawing board when it comes to crafting messaging to suit with the times, right? And I'm sure everyone on this call would agree that probably empathy is the most important currency in today's situation. And from salespeople to marketers to customer support agents, it's kind of imperative to ensure that there is a consistent tone of empathy and authenticity in every customer interaction. So that translated into driving, establishing a new framework for messaging that does not come across as being tone deaf, and then training everyone in the organization across all teams that interface with customers to be able to communicate in that consistent tone and voice. The third theme was for us around driving innovation, because we foresaw that everyone was going to pivot to a digital only or a digital first strategy. So there is going to be, as we are already seeing now, a lot of clutter and digital fatigue. So how do you break through the clutter, and how do you try to be innovative, both in terms of the kind of content you put out, and in terms of the channels you leverage to reach out to your prospects? I think those are, that's another big focus area I would say my team really doubled down on in the last 3 months, and we've done some creative stuff that I can share later. The fourth one was around budgets, right? And when it comes to budget, the question on top of everyone's mind was, hey, should we stop spending, right? Should we cut down our cost? But we actually took a step back and they said, hey, we really don't know how the market is responding during this time. And what we need is a budget optimization strategy and not a budget reduction strategy. So we decided that we will start looking at the metrics every single day, and then take weekly calls around optimizing budgets by refocusing our investments into markets, into products, into verticals that were actually doing well and where we were still seeing growth and positive ROI. In fact, over the last 3 months, we are pretty surprised by the results and the growth that we have seen despite what is happening around us. The fifth theme for us was, how do you ensure that you strengthen your sales and marketing alignment even further now? More than ever, because it was important that there needs to be one joint go-to-market strategy between sales and marketing teams, and they need to act as equal partners. So there was a lot of effort that was put over the last 3 months to ensure that we work very, very closely, and we have a joint plan. We have a joint view of how the business was performing, so that we could quickly pivot and make adjustments as required. So those were my broad 5 themes that we aligned on. And I think those 5 guiding principles have stayed with us over the last 3 months, I would say.
Great, Arun, great. Very detailed response. Hitu, would you like to walk us through how it's been for Microsoft and on your end?
Sure. I just want to check, Sachin, am I still audible? Okay, the audio was breaking up for me a little, so I switched off the video just for a bit. Is the audio all right?
The audio is all right. And I will also check with the ad tech team and come back to you.
Perfect. Okay, so from a Microsoft standpoint, let me just start first with the business before I shift to the marketing strategy shift that we made. So as a business, our model has always been to bring the power of technology to the organizations and their end users anywhere, anytime, on any device. So that was not the challenge. It was really the extreme speed at which customers were made to make that shift, that unprecedented surge in a very unpredictable environment that happened is what we had to adjust to, and that's where most of our learnings were. And in that context, as marketing, I would say we quickly tweaked and improved first the elasticity and then adjusted across all the 4Ps: product, price, place, and promotion, and then actually snapped on two more critical ones, which is people and process. And I'll talk through all of these 6Ps, if I may. Let me start with first people and process, because the first action was really to prioritize our people before responding to that external market stimuli. The immediate focus across the org, and which would be the case across for anyone, was on the physical and emotional health of your employees. The second was to ensure that everyone had the tools and resources they needed to be productive remotely. Third was then providing clarity and empowerment on decisions each one can take. It is not a normal context, that you're operating in, and it is not the standard processes, etc. So empowering your first line is extremely critical. We also quickly adjusted our processes because in a large global matrixed org, you run on very well-defined process, but that kind of can come in the way of being nimble and agile. So we stood these daily virtual war rooms, which accelerated our decision making. It had a cross section of stakeholders from marketing, sales, our partner teams, and even engineering, so that we could get that real-time pulse and respond to the immediate challenges, so that you connected to your field and you are getting the voice of the customer instantly in. So from that, if I shift the focus to the customer and come to the 4Ps, I think the immediate that the sales team was seeking help on was adjustment of the price offers, because recognizing there were cash flow hurdles with the customers, they were either holding on to decisions or had just genuine issues in terms of cash outflow. So we rapidly rolled out multiple offers, from free product credits to deferred payments to 0% financing options. So we kind of quickly, the first thing we responded to was on a price or customer offer front. Second, we were able to innovate in flight with the product feature and enhancements and updates. I think Microsoft Teams is a great example, where we saw almost 12 million surge in users in a single week, which is just exponential in terms of the business as usual to what it was. And yet we had to keep with not just the updates, but with enhanced features, like within 2 or 3 weeks, on how we were quickly adapting to what the need of the hour was and what customers were calling out things that they needed. Third, I would say, was on our go-to-market is partner-led. And hence, being in lockstep with our partners was another critical dimension for us, listening to their feedback, adjusting our investments and incentives so that it provides them that required agility and resources. It was amazing to see the speed at which our partners spun off some remote work offers across from SMB all the way to large enterprises. So that third dimension was really with our channel partners. And last, but most importantly, and like Arun also called out, just building that trust and instilling confidence in the customer and getting that message out was paramount for us. And the focus really is on just going beyond product selling and being vested in helping them through this phase. And not just in our narrative, but in fulfillment too. And if you would see both our campaigns that we have, that we've rolled out, well, it's called We Are Together and Back to Business for SMBs, are anchored around that trust and empathy. Both, like I said, from just not from a narrative, but in terms of, are you fulfilling that promise or not?
Awesome. Great insights, Hitu. For those that have joined in late or probably missed this part of the conversation, I just want to do a quick recap. So Hitu, thanks for sharing the actual Microsoft Insight story. The big themes that I heard from you is 4 Ps of marketing and how you brought about offering and solution enhancements and adjustments while looking at your employees, partners, and customers. The common theme in what both of you said was internal and external alignment. But Arun, thank you also for talking about budget optimization, messaging alignment, and the key role that innovation played. So on that note, I want to switch over to the next question. This is or was a very challenging time, and our participants would love to hear from you how you went about communicating and aligning internally with stakeholders when all of this kicked off suddenly. Were you dealing with increased pressure from sales, Was there a lot of conversation about the impact on your sales pipelines? And has that impacted your working relationship? And how have you tended to that? And Hitu, maybe you go first for this one.
Sure. Okay, let me just start by saying the need for speed has never been greater. And I think the business stakeholders across different units within the organization are recognizing that there's a need for real-time alignment and quick decision-making. So like I mentioned earlier, the virtual war rooms that we kicked off, which were earlier daily and now shifted to kind of a weekly cadence, or building cross-functional agile squads. The intent there is to break the silos. In large organization, like I said, because of the process and everything else, you tend to operate. So the idea is that we break silos and stay connected, not just with sales, but with our partner teams, engineering, kind of do that cross function is one of the things. So I'm kind of going a little beyond sales and just making a point that the entire org needs to come in together to address this. And I'll get specifically in a moment to the pipe piece that you asked. I think the second thing I would call out is the cadence of our planning and decision cycle is changing. We are, Microsoft is a July to June fiscal year that we follow. We are currently in planning for our next fiscal, and quarterly is the new annual. You're not planning for the fiscal, you're planning and kind of testing and evaluating what each quarter needs to hold for. So that's the second change or agility we're bringing across stakeholders. Specifically on pipe, well, yes, there is an increased expectation from sales, but there's also a far more receptiveness that I see in problem solving it together. Like for the first time in my 2 decades, I'm seeing sales leaders coming to the table to jointly ideate. Because the reality is no one has all the answers and we are better off solving them together. So if I could take an example to bring it to life with our mid-market sales team, we were solving for a weak pipe and constraints with existing formats and webinar fatigues and everything that all of us are familiar with. So they came up with a suggestion of rolling out listening circles, where we said there'll be zero product pitch and we would just listen to understand the real brokers the customers are facing. And the team quickly kind of spun off and orchestrated a virtual boardroom session with the supply chain operations procurement heads of about 10 to 12 manufacturing customers. And we got firsthand perspective of what their current challenges are. There was nothing Microsoft that was spoken in that meeting at all. And the goodness here is that you had your entire team of sellers in it who could hear it, versus they having to do in a one-on-one conversation where they will be trying to probe this. So they got these insights. And then they identified common themes and worked with our ISV partners and tech experts to go back to the customer with customized solutions. So it's truly a partnership, because I think everyone realizes no one has the superpowers to solve for it. We'll test, experiment, and learn. So that's what I would say is the relationship or how we making that partnership work with sales.
Perfect. I totally agree. I am on the sales side. Arun, we would love to hear your point of view and from a Freshworks perspective specifically.
I think for me personally, I feel that marketers can earn the trust and a seat at the table with sales or with any other business leaders when you start talking the language of the business, right? So I very consciously ensure that when we are having sales conversations and when you're having conversations on revenue and pipeline, we tend to focus on the real metrics that matter, which is sales qualified pipeline and marketing sourced revenue, and be able to allow people to visualize, track, and provide visibility into that on a regular basis against sharing metrics like impressions, clicks, social media mentions, which often tend to be the world in which marketers live. I think that is an important world to live in because that's what drives performance at the end of the day. But it's oftentimes people don't realize that it's not something that the sales guys really care about. Sales guys, you as a marketing team, at least in Freshworks, marketing is a significant driver of the pipeline, upwards of 50%. So that's there is a real dependence as well as a great partnership that already exists between sales and marketing in being able to drive the joint go-to-market strategy, right? So we ensure that we talk the metrics that really matter to the sales guys and really understand that as an internal customer, we are accountable a pipeline and building that and delivering that pipeline to them. The second thing that we actually did in the last 3 months is and this was something that we were anyways working on, but it came to fruition in the last 3 months because we accelerated the efforts, is we created a joint sales and marketing interlock dashboard, right? Which becomes the basis of our conversations between sales and marketing. So we start by talking, hey, what is the revenue target? What's the pipeline target? How much of that pipeline is sourced or influenced by marketing? Then break it down to the campaign level metrics to really help people visualize the entire journey between revenue and the top of the funnel metrics that we might be talking about, which is impressions and clicks and so on. So that brings a certain rigor, certain visibility and transparency to conversations, and just helps, I think, marketing build credibility within the organization, right? I've always thought of marketing as a primary driver of growth rather than as a brand enabler alone, which also it is, right? So that is the first thing I would say. Second thing I would say is just accelerating and doubling down on the conversations with different stakeholders within the organization. So just like Hitu said, we had almost a daily stand-up within the management team. And then we had regional stand-ups with our regional stakeholders happening on a daily basis in the first couple of weeks of the pandemic and the lockdown, which we then phased it out to weekly and bi-weekly stand-ups now. But I think the frequency of those conversations went up significantly. And we were looking at these metrics day in and day out together. And I think that just builds credibility and ensures that people understand the accountability that marketing also takes in, or the joint ownership that marketing takes in delivering revenue, right? So for me, I think those are the two things that I think really helped. And because of the nature of the SaaS business, where it is also very heavily driven by marketing, I think I've been fortunate to work in an environment where nobody questions the value of marketing. If anything, it's only how much can you deliver more, right? If not 60%, 70%, 80%, how much more can you guys deliver? And we have been fortunate to do that, I think, in the last few months. So it's really a very strong partnership. And I do feel that in my 15 plus years of my career, I feel I'm finally seeing a very, very healthy balance between the sales and marketing relationship at Freshworks more than anywhere else, right? Because we really work as true partners in crime, in delivering value for the business.
Great, Arun. Absolutely great listening to some of your thoughts. And Hitu, thank you for talking about stand-ups, your communication rhythm. A very interesting comment actually came up on our Zoom chat window, and where a participant said it all starts from the grounds up, and then it just lends itself to a framework. So I think that is very true. I will take a little bit of a pivot here, just talk to you about something you both alluded to earlier, which is customization, both in terms of products and solutions. But I think what will help our participants is if you could just address how you've customized your approach to effectively address business needs, customer sentiment, because we all understand no one size fits all during these times. And then how did that help you adapt your strategy? If you could just talk about that a little bit. Hitu, let's hear from you first, and then we'll come to Arun.
Sure. Okay. I think none of us will debate that this pandemic has made technology the engine for work, collaboration, creativity. It's just the center of how we're living today. And Satya recently spoke about in our recent quarterly earnings, he said that the industry has seen 2 years of digital transformation just in 2 months, and that trend line is clearly continuing. So at least at Microsoft, we've structured our response across 3 phases on how we kind of, across the business, and then I'll talk to marketing as well, how we're looking at it. This is crisis response, crisis recovery, and then reimagine for new growth models. Those are the 3 phases that we're calling out. Crisis response is truly that how are you helping your customers with business continuity, enabling their remote work, literally responding to the crisis to make sure the lights are on for everyone, you know. So the second phase is more about the recovery and the rebound. And that is where, how would you support the customer's business with those newer or adjusted business models that, you know, we are now getting into and may become the so-called new normal, will be the normal, I guess, for a lot of businesses. So how are you preparing them for the hybrid work scenarios? And how are you preparing as each business kind of figures out what that rebound is for them? So that's second phase. The third is really reimagining what the new growth model, once we've come out of this, and what would that look like. An example I would take, like before the lockdowns, I'm sure no school or institution would have dreamt of creating entirely virtual classrooms or virtual exams. And for all we know, this current stopgap may become the new norm with a whole new approach to education. I mean, radical, but maybe a student wouldn't graduate from a Harvard or an Oxford, but from courses offered by the top 10 professors of the world. Who knows? All I'm saying is that there will be businesses, there will be newer formats that we probably haven't thought of is what this might yield, and how are we preparing for that and supporting the customer. So those are the three phases on how we've structured. From a marketing strategy, we're obviously completely aligned to these three phases, and currently our go-to-market are 100% pivoted around phase one. And for certain verticals in phase two, because in this recovery phase, there is, like you said, there's no one-size-fit-all approach that will work. We will need to look at each industry vertical uniquely, because how they deal with the recession rebound will be different. And we need to tailor make our responses to that. So in summarizing, we're responding to the crisis response and a very customized, tailored approach to the ones who are kind of rebounding and are in that phase from a marketing standpoint.
Great. Arun, does some of that resonate for Freshworks as well? We'd love to hear your thoughts.
No, absolutely. I think we all agree that a peanut butter spread approach definitely doesn't work during these times, and that was our first realization as well. So, like with any other business, we also started with, hey, let's have a campaign that we can come up with that can apply across all regions. But quickly, when we started looking at the customer data, when we started speaking to our customers, we realized that there were pockets of opportunities that were still worth pursuing. And obviously some industries and some verticals were struggling during these times. So our approach to segmentation of opportunity, or the universe of opportunity, has been to look at industries that were thriving during the pandemic. And believe me, there are industries which are doing really, really well during this pandemic. And for example, if you think about media and entertainment, right, and OTT players, with so much time in hand and people all being locked down in their homes, right, the amount of media consumption has gone up significantly. So media and entertainment is one vertical that's doing really well. Similarly, last mile delivery companies, right, logistics companies, e-commerce, retail. So these are companies that are also doing really, really well. So we started looking at our universe of prospects into these three segments, which is thriving, surviving, and declining. And with each of them, we took a different approach, right? With the guys that were really doing well, the problems they faced were different, right? For instance, we are in the business of providing customer engagement solution. By that, I mean, we provide help desk solution for people to manage their contact center volumes and calling solutions, contact center solutions. We have CRM software, we have sales and marketing automation, so on and so forth. So we realized that, you know, there were these markets which were witnessing hyper growth because of what was happening. They had a unique set of challenges and problems because, for instance, they were looking at looking at an exponential growth in the traffic that they were receiving to their call centers, right? How would they scale customer support without having to scale their costs? Because you can't afford to hire a lot more people now, given the uncertainty that. So we offered solutions around AI and chatbots and how you could reduce your costs through automation, right? With the customers that were literally trying to sail through the pandemic, which we call the surviving segment, our approach was more to provide them a strategy around cost optimization and digital transformation, because those were the two levers that most of these companies would need to double down on if they were to really survive this pandemic and prepare themselves for the future, right? And finally, for the companies that were not really doing well, that were declining, the only thing that we offered was empathy. So amongst our existing customers, the most valuable ones, we went out on a limb to provide them all the support that they need. If required, financial relief for a couple of months, asking them what are the help we need. Right? So I think our go-to-market strategy was hinged upon this segmentation approach that we carved out at the beginning of the quarter. And almost all our sales plays, all our marketing campaigns were completely pivoted around these three different segments, and we took completely differentiated approach. And the good part is, because majority of the campaigns now are digital, you have the opportunity to reach out to them in a very, very personalized way with a differentiated messaging, right? So that is what really helped us, manage the last few months, I would say, with some amount of success, because we continue to grow even during these times, because we doubled down on opportunity, and we were fortunate to have a suite of solutions that a lot of our customers really needed during this time, right? And I'm sure that is true for Microsoft as well, as they must have seen an explosion in Microsoft Teams and so on and so forth. So my advice there would be to really focus on segmenting your audience in a precise manner by looking at all kinds of data. I would also not recommend ourselves to get buried in quantitative analysis. Really speak to your customers. Take a sample of customers across different industries, understand what's really going on with them, and then build a strategy around that, because most of them are still figuring out what to do.
Absolutely. I mean, just to sum that up, Arun and Hitu, I would say, is data-backed segmentation to really identify and reimagine new growth opportunities. That sounds like a good summation of what you've just talked about. One other aspect that we would like for you to cover for our participants is about something that's core to B2B marketing, which is in-person engagements. We all know that plays a big role in furthering customer conversations. We also know that nowadays there is a virtual or a webinar fatigue setting in. And so how are both of you and your organizations thinking of high-touch personalized engagements for your large accounts, for your key customers, as well as for SMBs? And I'd request Arun if you could take this first, and we'll move on to Hitu from there.
So I think, Sachin, it goes back to one of the core principles that we spoke about that has guided us during the last 5 months, which is around innovation and around trying to break through the clutter, right? I think we all understand that it's going to take time for the world to return to normalcy. And therefore, even if some markets like Europe and Australia are opening up, I think offline events are going to see a decline, or not going to come back to the same levels that we saw, at least for the next 6 to 7 months, right? So how do you then still be able to create opportunities for those intimate conversations, for that high touch engagement, and most importantly, just break through the clutter? So I think some of the approaches that have worked really well for us, I think when it comes to creating brand awareness within our segment, I think we really double down on formats of content that were unique, that were differentiated. For instance, we launched a Netflix style documentary format of an online summit, right? And made that available for free for everyone to access. We saw tremendous engagement even from senior decision makers. So we saw about, I think, 7,000 to 10,000 registrations globally. And majority of them were upmarket customers, right? So that gave us confidence that yes, there is an appetite, there is fatigue settling in, but there is also an appetite for unique and differentiated content. Second is we try to differentiate ourselves on channels. So yes, we have email and LinkedIn and Google to kind of help us build pipeline, but we also wanted to see if we could leverage some unique channels like which were local to the market, right? For instance, we started creating WhatsApp groups, and the team has been really creative. I must give full credit to them that they came up with this idea of doing a closed group WhatsApp conversation or a panel with a set of C-level audiences, right? So we did that, and we were just amazed to see the response to something like that we were able to get almost 80 to 100 C-level executives on a WhatsApp group, because all that they were looking for was help and advice and understand what else their peers were going through. And just creating that platform allows you to build an authentic way in which you're adding value to the community on a channel that they are most comfortable being on, and in a manner that is very, very personalized, right? The third thing, I think what is happening is also a lot of these third-party events, industry events that are happening out there, they are also trying to reinvent themselves in a way that will help us, create those platforms for deeper, intimate engagement. So one of the kinds of events that's been doing really well for us is these virtual speed meeting kind of events, where you get C-level executives on a one-on-one conversation, organized by a third-party player. So that is another opportunity to create deeper engagement. The other thing that we've also done is a lot of times our effort is to really see how we can help and offer valuable advice to our prospects and customers during these times, because everybody is trying to figure out. So we gave them access to a set of experts, right, who were subject matter experts in the space of contact center solutions or customer engagement or customer experience or digital transformation, and made them available for free for our prospects to set up one-on-one meetings with, so that they can get consultation and advice from them. So I think these are formats in which companies, B2B brands can, in a very authentic way, try to build deeper connection, even at a one-on-one level, using digital formats. And that's been our learning. And I wouldn't say that we have cracked all these formats well, but we're still learning. But some of these experiments have really worked well for us. And finally, what we also did was a lot of the content that we typically gate because we want to generate leads, we actually just ungated all of those content for the last 3 months, right? We set up exclusive content hubs targeting the personas that we target as a company. So we have something called a remote selling hub, which focuses on how to enable remote sales teams. We have something called as a remote support hub, which is focused on how to enable customer support agents to do their work more effectively while working from home. And then we have something called as a remote work hub, which is focused on how to enable employees to work remotely and how our, so we brought together a whole bunch of experts, crowdsourced content, as well as created original content, all made available for free. And I think that that initiative alone helped us kind of drive more than 60% of our non-paid traffic on our website over the last few months. So I think there is opportunity to go broad or to have a very narrow approach in building connections with your prospects and customers, even on digital channels. So I think I would encourage all marketing teams to force themselves to be a little bit bold and experiment, because I think this is also the time to experiment, learn, and try new things.
Great, Arun. Hitu, give us the inside Microsoft perspective on this.
So I think I want to build a lot on what Arun said. And I'll just start by saying that we need to have a learn fast, fail fast mindset, because like he said, the reality is none of us have cracked the code here, and we're experimenting and figuring out how do you design digitally native experiences? Because what we're doing right now is more reactive, porting a physical into a digital. And obviously, and we are recipients of that ourselves, the fact that is this really kind of substituting for what a physical might offer, and the richness. This is a bridge version, but not necessarily designed natively for a digital first. So with that said, I think at least at Microsoft, we have teams that are on the drawing board ideating what the next experiential breakthrough looks like in a virtual world, say using HoloLens and virtual reality. But in the interim, I'm happy to share some tangible learnings from our recent experimentation, and I'll bucket it under 2 heads. One, I'll go more because we have a lot of large enterprise customers, and what are we doing and trying differently there. And second, I'll just talk a little about virtual events, because all of us are doing it, and I would love to hear from others also on the chat. All of us have learnings, and we can grow off each other. So first on the large enterprises, we're dialing up our customized account-based engagements with what we call virtual on-campus formats. These are titled Future Decoded on Campus is what we call it. But since the customer can't come to us, we are going to them. And the beauty of this format is that it allows you to engage with the entire spectrum of your customer's buying center, from the CEO's office to your functional line of business heads to IT decision makers and to the end users. You can curate content for each one of them. And what we do is we bring our senior leadership along with the subject matter experts, so that we discuss the customer's digital transformation strategy, but more in a show and tell experiential format versus with just PowerPoint. So that's something we are doing more in the enterprise space. We're kind of going deeper there. On virtual events, there are quite a few learnings, I would say, and I would probably bring in both a global and local execution, because we have some large format events like we do Build is an example, Ignite, where it's across the globe with 40-50,000 attendees, and our worldwide teams are learning and helping us as well. So I kind of captured a few from there. I think the first and most important, and I might be stating the obvious, but please do not compromise on the platform. Invest time in choosing the right platform depending on the objective and experience you are trying to create. That is just table stakes. Our sessions need to work harder, because other than cutting down the time and they being more snappy and all of that goodness that we know, the session needs to work harder. And what I mean by that is, the reality is the attendee is looking at mails, clicking other links, in general multitasking. And we're learning that we effectively co-opt that behavior versus try to compete with it, because you cannot. So there's certain things that we are testing, and we're saying, why don't we leverage the opportunity and logically infuse interactive content into the slides, like animation videos or graphics or links that they can click on. And then we've actually seen that people reuse and promote it in social as well. So it's not just about that canned recorded session. If there is something that I am constantly giving to the users as add-on content, they can interact and use that as well. So that's second. Third, breakouts are critical. And again, it totally depends on what format of event, etc., that you've created. But when you create multiple tracks, things like Ask the Expert session Arun spoke about, or industry tracks, or technical hands-on labs, or it allows people to pick what is most feasible for them. And don't forget the networking or the connection moments. And it is much tougher, but at least make sure that you are intentfully creating these meeting lounges for one-on-ones with your customer CXOs and your leaders. So if you have a format, if it's a large format that you're doing, make sure that you're paying attention to serving all sorts of audiences and their requirements. Fourth, I would say fun is not a bad word. It is okay, actually more than okay, to infuse fun, light-hearted moments to break the monotony. You need that more so than in a physical format that we would do. Needless to say, it has to be natural humor versus forced, but like we're using a lot more cartoon animation, and I would say we were earlier very more uptight and very business-like. We are testing things as well. We're adding more fun trivia and saying for $10 Starbucks gift card or whatever. Or there was this in the Build session, there was a speaker who was actually talking about virtual happy hours and the fact he was at the end of the day. And at the end, he made a cocktail at the end of the thing. Interestingly, that became the hit and was posted, retweeted, whatever else. So experiment with those things. And I'll add quickly two more. Leverage user-generated content to have them engaged. Use things like polls, something that we started with. But what I would add additionally is use a proper app. There is, of course, you can type it in, but when you use the app and you see the real time where people are voting, so invest in some of those, right, apps, technologies, whatever, so that the experience is better. Ask audience to post images, video tracks, and kind of keep a track also of your social board, and use that content back in on what they're saying, tweeting, etc. So some of these things that we're doing is helping. Last but not the least, content is still the hero. That doesn't change from a physical to a virtual, but more so than in a physical, you don't rely on the whiz-bang tech to cover up for boring speakers, presentations, etc. Make sure you know your audience, what is it that they're looking for, and design the content to serve it. Because in a physical, you still relatively have them locked up, and you hope that at least in the networking, I'll make up if my, whatever my session was. And here you don't, it's an instant cross button and you're opted out if you are not engaged. So do not compromise on the content. So those are some of the things that I would say tangibly we are learning.
Great, very insightful sharing, Hitu. There are also a ton of questions from our participants. So we'll quickly move over to addressing some of these questions and then see if we still have time to come back to some of our conversation tracks. One of the interesting ones that showed up is a question about positive outcomes. So these have clearly been troubled times. People have been very unsure, but our participants want to know if there have been one or more positive outcomes for your respective businesses during this pandemic, and what were those? So Arun, maybe you go first, and we'll have Hitu wrap it up.
I think a couple of things I would say on that. I think the biggest positive outcome is that it just brought people in the company together to come together in a way that I don't think any other event could have, right? So it forced greater collaboration. There is a greater sense of bond within amongst employees, and I think that translates into better outcomes for the company, right? Because we're all in this together. I think secondly, it is also I think from a marketing perspective, I think it has really forced the specialists in marketing to adapt and become generalists, because they realize that what you need to survive during this phase is you need a wide range of diverse skills, not just being digital, not just being events, not just being content people, but you have to be able to do a wide variety of things, right? So I think it has forced people to adapt and bring out the hidden talents, if I may say, from the team members. So I think that's a great outcome. I think the most important outcome, I would say, from a humanitarian perspective, is that I think businesses have learned to become more empathetic. They've learned to introspect, and we've realized that you really need to be a true friend to your customer or to your partner or to your employees to be able to get through this period and emerge stronger, right? So I think it has. I personally feel that it has all made us reflect as human beings on what our priorities are from life, from work, from our teams, from the culture that we have internally. And I think that's, and that introspection was long due. It continues to happen, but it has happened at a much greater level of depth now than ever before. So I think that to me kind of summarizes the positive outcomes that I feel the company, people, and humans have witnessed during these times.
Hitu, curious to hear your part of yours.
I would 200% true that, everything that he said, because I'll end up repackaging and saying a lot of, let me add a couple of more, but he's really summed it up really well. I think what this whole virtual is doing if you look at the positive, is because the physical boundaries are not there. Just as an example, just going back to that build piece that I was talking about, because it happens in the US, or there are a lot of these marketing industry events we have. Adobe does one, which is in Vegas, etc. It did not allow a lot of us, just because of the physical travel and other things. Those, now you have the ability, going back to that education example that I was taking as well, it is making things, content, opportunities far more accessible. So I think that would be one of the things that I would call out, which is, I'm not just making a marketing comment, but in general, things are far more accessible for a whole lot of people. So that's one I would say. Second, I think I'll just build on that humanitarian point that Arun made, because that is really crucial. It's not that the sales quotas are going anywhere, or it's not that you don't have to sell, but there is that genuine shift that's happening, which was harder earlier, because I think each one of us realize what we're going through. It is a generation redefining phase that we are going through. So I think people are far more mindful and cognizant. So that need to be vested in the interest of that customer and their success is far more. There are a whole lot more, but I guess in the interest of time, I'll call out those two that stand out for me.
Absolutely. Fantastic. One tactical conversation point that's actually come up as someone's question, and I would love to hear both of your thoughts on this, is, has there been a shift in your KPIs and metrics that you have either additionally started tracking or started focusing on in the past few months? In terms of just customer journeys, have you started looking at them differently? And does this mean any big shifts in how B2B and B2C marketing is going to pivot as an outcome?
Well, I can take that.
So sure, Arun, please go ahead.
So I think, see, the customer, visualizing the customer journey is such a big topic in itself. And I think while every marketer, every marketing leader speaks about it, the reality is it's really, really hard to do it unless you have the right tools, the right infrastructure that is able to tie in the data across all customer touch points, right? So it's something that I believe needs to be done at all points in time, but I think we have started doing that, going a lot more deeper into that topic in the last 3 months. And I think the good thing about this is that now everything is digital, so it's easier to track. And so once you have, today we are fortunately able to stitch together the entire journey from the time, whether be it a visit to the website or a download on a white paper or an outreach from one of my SDR teams or a sales guy who has been in a conversation, are able to tie in the entire journey to the maximum extent possible using the tools and the infrastructure that we have. When you have that visibility, I think it forces, it allows you to cull new insights out of that journey to understand, okay, what is the ideal and most optimal conversion path for your customer, right? What are the total number of touch points that you need to have against, through what channels and through what medium and through what content that you need to deliver to be able to extract the maximum value, either to reduce the conversion path or to maximize the customer value at the end of the journey, right? So I think stitching the customer journey itself is a big initiative. I think a lot of companies struggle with because they lack the tools or the resources or the expertise to build that view. Secondly, once you have that view, it allows you to unearth a whole set of insights around, fast conversion paths, marketing attribution in terms of which channel and which content or which tactic is actually delivering the maximum value, and therefore where should you double down on investments. It gives you a better picture of ROI itself, because the true ROI of your marketing dollar, because the revenue happens through after you have engaged with a prospect across different channels, right? And to be able to truly understand and ascertain the value of each of those customer touch points in nudging them towards that final sale, and then being able to redistribute that money or the dollar that you have at your disposal towards the right marketing tactic is itself a great insight that you can have. And that allows you to look at new metrics, right? In terms of marketing touch revenue, marketing sourced and influenced revenue, how many touches does it take for you to convert a customer, which content tactic offer combination is driving that highest conversion, and so on and so forth. It's more to optimize your funnel and your marketing efforts, right? So that's my perspective on that. And it's a very, very important topic for all B2B marketers.
Great. You can just hear from them.
Yeah, I would say that there aren't net new KPIs. The KPIs will not change, and everything like what Arun just said, you regardless of the context, you need to be outcome driven as marketers. You need to have tangible impact back to the business, and depending on the business industry that you're coming from, it may variate for each one of us. So standardizing them may not be most apt, but do not shy away. So just as examples, and something like I said, since we're in that planning phase, and I was pushing the team hard that if there is an activity where you cannot tangibly translate on what is the impact back to the business, knock it off, because any which way everyone is working 24/7, so you don't need extra. It's surround noise. It is not something, it is taking your bandwidth, it is not meaning. If you cannot answer for yourself, trust me, that is probably not adding value back. So challenge yourself on what I would say outcome driven. The KPIs are what we know of. I think Arun kind of articulated. There is already a shift in this context of modern marketing, where the old one touch MQL that we knew of, like one touch and there is a qualified lead and you give it to the seller. All of us know that's the world we're evolving from, and the whole automation and data driven is helping us do that. So it's more a conversation lead versus a one-time touch lead. So, and that to me is not because of COVID. It existed. It just needs to get more amplified now that there is a bigger need now on the ROI on the dollar. There is a bigger support that the field seller needs. So it just becomes more pronounced, not changed.
Awesome. Great. We are running a little bit behind time here. And so just to wrap up this session, I think one theme that showed up in a few questions and is an important consideration, just given the nature of these times, is work-life balance and the well-being for yourself and for your teams. So this questions come up in multiple different formats, but I think what people really want to understand is, given the surge in work assignments, in virtual meetings, and a lot of challenging personal moments for people in a state of lockdown, how have you been thinking of re-energizing your teams and looking after their well-being? And Hitu, maybe you go first, and then we'll have Arun wrap it up for us.
Okay, I do have, it's interesting for me kind of taking on a new role, embracing a new team from the other side of the globe. So I was talking to someone on the call earlier, and I was saying this is definitely going into my COVID diaries because I have interesting things to share on what it means. But more specifically to the question, and why I want to share this as well, because you may have team members who are joining right now, and I have to admit that a virtual onboarding is a little bit of an uphill journey. You're trying to connect and build trust with people you haven't met before, and it takes more effort in a virtual world than physical. You suddenly realize your corridor chats, your coffee breaks, the visual signs that you pick up in meetings, the fun gossip, all these cues that help build that faster connection are not, it's being replaced with just voice as a medium if your videos are also switched off. So just be more mindful if you have team members who are joining in this space. Lean more to make sure that you are helping with their onboarding is one thing I would want to share, just kind of coming from my experience. On the work-life balance, there are two things I want to share. Fortunately for me, I have a very active and fun team with whom we have these wacky virtual downtimes. Just last Friday, we gave farewell to a team member, and I was amazed with the team's creativity, just working around. It didn't seem like it was virtual because it was 90 minutes of sheer fun. By the end of it, my jaw was hurting. So how do you, there are ways, and I think each one of us are learning and adapting that if this is how it will be, let's make the most of it. So make sure you have that me time on your downtime or detox hours. Everyone has different things. Do that happy hours. The last I would say, which is very critical, and as leaders, an organization culture-wide, we need to establish, because there was clear demarcation between home and workplace. Today, it's a home workplace 24/7, and I see myself and almost all my team members grappling with that concept of, you remember earlier we would say quality personal family time, and there's quality work time, and you're grappling because everything is blended. The word quality itself is missing right now. So the answer, I think, somewhere lies in the collective. I see that more and more that you bring people together, sharing ideas, and just introducing simple disciplines and norms, like no mails over the weekends, device timeouts, or putting PTO calendar blocks, for your entire team. They are small things, but these things do make a huge difference. And last, I would say is just be more honest and authentic in your connections. When you ask, how are you, make sure to really know how the person is doing. Do not assume, because each person's context and what they're dealing with is different. So I think it's on each one of us to again lean and make those connections. So those are a few things that I would say that we're trying to work around this as a team. No perfect silver bullet as yet.
Awesome, great. Let's hear it from Arun.
Well, I think for me, it's hard to balance work and life during these times. So it's like Hitu was saying, the boundaries are blurring. And what I think as leaders, we need to consciously do is to try and reduce the stress levels on the team, right? And one way to reduce the stress level is by having more transparent conversations on what's really happening in the company, what's really happening in the team, what's happening to budgets, etc., etc., etc. And in cases where possible, provide the psychological safety to your team around things that are not going to change, jobs that are not going to be lost, right? Just providing that psychological safety just removes a lot of stress from the team and allows them to focus their limited time and energy on the things that really matter. Second, I would say is I have at least felt that a lot of folks in this part of the world shy away from taking a vacation, right? And we need to enforce a culture where we know that a team member is reaching a point of burnout. It's open. You need to have that open and transparent conversation saying, hey, I think you're burning out. You need to take a vacation. So I've literally started wherever on my team where I'm seeing that burnout happening, I've been asking them, when is your next vacation? Have you started planning for it? I literally ask them for a plan for their vacation so that, you know, it forces that culture and it comes top down, that they don't think of it as, you know, shying away from work, but they really need to recuperate and recover from the stress that we've all been going through over the last few months. The third, I think, is be generous in showing your gratitude towards your team during these times, right? I think that also helps them understand, empathize, and build that relationship of trust with you. And I think when I personally feel that if the team is fully energized, they will figure out how to manage their time, right? You don't need to tell them how to balance their work and life. There are people who have more energy. They want to go all out and take on big projects. There are people who want to balance their life more between what's happening on the work and the personal front. So allow them the space to figure out what works best for them, show them gratitude for what they're already doing during these testing times. I think that is extremely important. And once you do that, I think the stress levels automatically come down, and the team generally feels more energized. I also try and do Ask Me Anything or virtual coffee sessions with individual teams in smaller groups, so that I try and address any questions and concerns that they might have, or any chatter that they might have heard of that's bothering them, so that I clear the air and with full transparency tell them what's going on. I think giving that transparency takes away a lot of stress, and I think that's very, very important. So increase your frequency of communication with your team through multiple channels, be it one-on-one or through one-to-many conversations, but communicate more. I think that's really, really important.
Great to hear your thoughts, Hitu and Arun. I think the underlying factor there is about thoughtfulness and empathy, but I will quote Hitu here also. I think a perfect statement made there, the answer lies in the collective. So yep. On that note, and since we are almost at the hour and a little bit over time actually, I just want to express a lot of gratitude for both of you taking time out. Arun, in the middle of the day for you. I know you joined us from Chennai. This must be one of your busy days. Thank you so much, and great insights. Hitu, specifically for you in Seattle, I think the clock's already turned over to the next day, but thank you so much for staying awake and joining us this late in the day. Also, very warm welcome to your new role, and we hope to catch a coffee with you in person sometime soon. With that, I will hand over to Shiny for any announcements and a session wrap.
That was super amazing and insightful. Thank you, Arun, Hitu, and Sachin for bringing that awesome conversation to us.